Hey folks, it's time for some more quarantine drinking with GDP and the pig. I am GDP and this is my pig. Today's a little bit different because instead of drinking one wine or tasting one wine, I have four, all from the same producer. So let's jump right in. The producer is Ugo Lequio. Ugo Lequio. It's kind of a hard name to pronounce, a little unusual for an Italian name. He is a producer in Neve in Barbaresco, a small producer. He works with about 6 hectares. He's been making wine since 1981, so he's not a new producer, but he's probably new to a lot of people because he's so small. We have 4 wines. These are all available from vdltwine.com. There are 4 wines from his portfolio that we have and are sharing today. They're all very different, very unique, really fascinating examples of what they are. The first wine is the 2017, it's a Langhe Arneis. It's actually from Roero, the Roero region where Arneis is so famous. From Guarena d'Alba is the town. The Roero is important for Arneis because the soil there is incredibly sandy. You can drive past hillsides and it really looks like a dune. I mean, it is just basically pure sand. I'm not sure this is grown in pure sand, but it certainly gives the impression of coming from a sandy soil. There's a lightness to it. These wines, incidentally, are all on their second day. I tried them yesterday. I have to admit that for my palate, Piedmontese wines in general tend to be better on the second day when they're young like this. These are all sort of young. These are current releases in any event. Arneis and I have a very difficult relationship. To my palate, the vast majority of Arneis are not enjoyable. Let me say that. The wine is sold as a mineral wine, a floral wine, a delicate wine, and so many that I've tasted are so marked by their yeast. They're very estery and fruity and sticky, spackly in the mouth. They don't refresh the palate. And for me, white wine is all about refreshing the palate. And this wine absolutely refreshes the palate. It was a little bit fruitier yesterday on the nose, but today it has a very floral scent. It's a bit sagey in the minerality. It's almost like a jasmine-like aspect to it as well. It's not a facile wine on the nose. It's not a fruity, tons of apricot and peach Arneis. In the mouth, there is more than sufficient sort of lime-tinged green peachy fruit, but that's layered over this incredibly tense, almost salty mineral bed. It has these lovely nuanced dried flower, white flower, and herb sort of notes. Great length, real tension in the mouth, and it really refreshes the palate. And what strikes me about this wine is that it's 14.5% alcohol, and I'm drinking it a day old at room temperature, and you don't sense the alcohol at all. It's more generous on the second day. The first day was leaner, a little, perhaps too austere for many palates. Here it's becoming more generous, a little bit more rounded. It's longer, and I think as the wine ages in the bottle or sits on the counter for another day, it'll round out even more, become more generous. So this is, 14.5% alcohol. It could be objectionable to some people, but it shouldn't be because you don't sense it at all. And the next wine, again, all from Ugo Lequio. This is the Barbera d'Alba Superiore. This is 2015, and this is clocking in at 13.5% alcohol, which to me is surprising because a lot of Barbera is not well balanced at 13.5. A lot of producers feel like it needs to be 14, 14.5 to get that acid down to about 5.5 grams per liter, which is where I think most people want Barbera. They want the acidity. They want to feel the freshness, but they don't want 7.5 grams that strips off the enamel of your teeth. Now, this is interesting because, as far as I can tell, the only Barbera that is able to produce balanced wines at around 13.5% alcohol are older vines. That's not entirely true. There are a couple of fringe producers that do a great job, but in general, old vines create wines that are more well-balanced, more with better equilibrium from the get-go. This actually is from Vigna Gallina, which is the famous Barbaresco vineyard. This is a wine, I had this yesterday with duck, roast duck, and it was superb with roast duck. But today, it's even better. A little bit about the winemaking. It's about a 10-day fermentation, 8 to 12 days. And it spends 20 months in 25 hectoliter, both the medium-sized big barrels. Very classical winemaking style. And today, the nose is so much more fragrant. Yesterday it was sort of reticent, very typical, plummy fruit, leather, a little bit of violet, a little floral note, what you would expect from Barbera. But today it's much more balsamic, it's much more complex, it's much more nuanced. It's much more about small woodland berries, dark berries, blackberries, and boysenberries. There's still a little plumminess to it though. But it smells so much better. And Barbera is not a hugely perfumed grape. It's not famous for perfumed wine. So this is pretty intense aromatics for Barbera. Yesterday it was plummy and very smooth and sort of rounded, and the acidity seemed plenty high, but for my palate, a little lower than I would like. Today it's lost some of that plushness, and it's gained much more detail, a lot more detail on the palate. The acidity is super refreshing on the finish. The fruit is still dark, but it's a redder shade of dark fruit. It really is very good, and it's got great persistence. It's got a fine, almost like graphite minerality to it, a black minerality on the finish, on the back end, through the finish, which helps refresh the palate. It offers great contrast to the fruit here. Super well balanced. 2015 is a great Barbera vintage. Barbera loves warm vintages. It's one of the grapes that really needs a hot vintage and thrives in a vintage like 15. But again, 13.5% alcohol. This is superbly well balanced. Really a lovely wine. The next wine is a Langhe Nebbiolo from 2017, which is a solar vintage. It was a hot vintage. It's a lot of heat. And you would expect a wine to be quite opulent and rich and powerful. And in particular for Langhe Nebbiolo, that's definitely not what I'm looking for. I don't want a baby Barbaresco. I want Langhe Nebbiolo. I want a wine that tastes like Nebbiolo, smells like Nebbiolo, feels like Nebbiolo, and was produced in a style, winemaking that's different than Barbaresco or Barolo production. And here you have a much shorter fermentation of about a week and 5 or 6 months in the botte, and then it's probably 6 months in bottle, and then it's ready to be sold on the market. And you're looking for freshness here. And you get a lot of bright evergreen fruit. You get a lot of sage. There's much more balsamic notes and minerality here today. Yesterday it was a lot more roasted cherry fruit. And this wine is not moving. It has not changed as much as the Arneis and the Barbera. It's still pretty tense. It's got, like the Barbera, much redder fruit. It's fresher on day 2 than it was on day 1. Day 1 it was a little coiled up and not ready to go. Day 2, the tannins have integrated. It's zingy. It's superbly aromatic in the mouth. There's still a hint of watermelon-like freshness to it. A little bit of chalky tannin on the finish. It is Nebbiolo. There's no doubt about that. It sort of beats you up in the mouth, but it's a very small boxer who's actually in your mouth, punching the teeth from the back. It's pretty delicious. It's pretty intense stuff. And now we go to the big guns. And the big gun is Ugo Lequio's Barbera Gallina. This is a vineyard that was made famous by Bruno Giacosa. And Bruno Giacosa is actually a good landmark to find Ugo Lequio's winery in Neve. If you've ever been to Bruno Giacosa, you drive past it. There's that lot that holds 5 cars that you're not supposed to park in, but if you get there early enough, you can squeeze your little car in there. But after that, along the road, there's a parking lot, which is directly across the street from Ugo Lequio. So he's easy to find. Anyway, this is a beautiful south-facing vineyard. Vines were planted in 53, 63, 71. It does a classical Barbaresco fermentation of more than 2 weeks, less than 3 weeks, and then 20 months in 25 hectoliter barrels. Yesterday, this was reticent. It was tight. It certainly was more about the structure in the mouth as well, but the aromatics were needed a lot of coaxing. Today, on the other hand, it's got a remarkable set of minty, worn wood, sage, green preserved lime, very fresh. Again, this is 2013. Again, these wines are very representative of their vintages. And 2013 was a much cooler vintage. And here you have a wine which shows that character, a lot of poise, fruit that's very red, red cherry, little red currant, raspberry. And in the mouth, it is very fine, very elegant, very perfumed, beautiful tannins, very present but fine grained. It hasn't progressed the same way as the other three wines did. This is a wine that really demands time in the bottle. It's better today than it was yesterday. It's showing, like the other two, more red fruit, less overt plumpness, although it was not plump at all yesterday. But you need time for these tannins to integrate further. This is a wine, it's perfectly fine to drink today. If I was going to drink this with a meal, tonight I'm having Indian food, this is not going to work. The Arneis is going to rock. The Barbera might work as well. But this wants grilled lamb chops, fatty, gamey meat. It would be perfect right now. Or this wants between 6 and 10 years in the cellar, at which point it would be superb with a veal roast, ossobuco, risotto milanese. It's a very nice wine. Totally classic, totally Barbaresco, mid-weight, elegant, long, a lot of raspberry coming out now, a lot of soil tones, a little chalky, just a hint of wood influence. It's not like cinnamon or cigar box, but on the finish there's just this little touch of old wood that gives it a little bit more detail. So those are the wines of Ugo Lequio. They are a classic portfolio of wines available from vdltwine.com, and I am thrilled to have consumed less than half of the 4 bottles yesterday and to finish less than half of them today, and perhaps tomorrow when I finish them on day 3 I'll post something, a couple of words about them, but I don't know that we want to talk about them much more. They have given me a lot of pleasure, and I'm sure if you try them they'll give you just as much pleasure. And that's it for today's quarantine drinking. I hope you guys have a great evening and see you soon with our next bottle.